Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the New Construction Marketing Podcast. My name is Anya Chrysanthemum, and I'm very excited for our guest today. Pierrette Tierney is joining me. We had a pleasure of getting to know each other a little bit during Women in Residential Construction Conference, and she was one of the speakers. And I was just blown away by the presentation and her experience, and I thought you guys would love to hear from her and hear her story, how she got into new construction, because it seems that every single one of us has a very unique story of how we get into the business. So welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you, Anya.
All right, so first things first, Pierrette, how did you get a name like that? That's such a cool name. So
very unique. So I have French heritage. My grandfather was born in Paris, and his name was Pierre. And like all egotistical Frenchmen, he needed to name someone after him, but he didn't have any sons. So I actually have an aunt, Pierrette, and I'm kind of named after both my grandfather and my aunt.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So have you kept in touch with the French side of the family?
I have actually. This summer, I had the great fortune of, now that I work at a family-owned business and kind of out of the corporate world, I actually took a 6-week sabbatical this summer and took my 2 children, 10 and 8, to France for 6 weeks.
That's amazing.
It was an amazing trip. It was really fun.
And I think one of your good friends was able to join you there too, right?
Yes, who I think is going to be joining you on your podcast, Rebecca Caffiero, and I go way back to the beginning of our careers at Pulte Homes in Las Vegas, and then got to work together again at Taylor Morrison in the Bay Area. And we've been kind of lifelong friends through this industry.
It's so funny how you meet people in this industry and you become friends for life. And so you end up being very close with each other. So, and I think it's such a crazy industry that not many people understand, especially with the whole weekends and all that. It can be a grind, and it's tough to keep friendships sometimes in this industry, right? Because you are missing out on so many events, and so you do develop those friendships kind of in the model homes, if you're partnered with somebody, or just your teammates going through the same experience. So that's so cool that you guys are still great friends.
Absolutely. I think ironically, most of my close circle of friends has stayed in touch from those original Pulte Vegas days. And many of us also found our husbands at work. So
nice.
Very tight industry. You never want to make enemies or burn bridges, because you never know when you'll be reconnected.
Definitely. So Pierrette, if you don't mind taking us through kind of the progression of your career, because you had kind of an unusual start in the industry, and how you were able to progress through the ranks very successfully. So I think it would be very inspirational for some of our listeners to hear, how did you do it? What did you do differently than some of your peers to get to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I had really no real estate background when I was first approached to enter new construction. And I had received a master's degree actually in journalism from USC, had spent some time at London's CNN bureau, and really thought that was going to be the trajectory of the path I was on. I had a really good girlfriend who worked at Pulte Homes in Las Vegas, and it was during a time when they were investing heavily in college recruiting. So I helped her set up some recruiting trips to USC to find new candidates for their business, and eventually ended up kind of getting recruited myself. My girlfriend, Katie Waiter, is one of the best salespeople I know, and she sold me.
Shout out to Katie.
Shout out to Katie. She is incredible. And so, she basically sold me on the idea, and I figured, what do I have to lose? I'll give it a try, and if I don't like it, I can always come back to journalism in California. So I headed out to Vegas, and I actually started in the industry really at the worst time in the market. My first day on the sales floor was when they did a huge price adjustment at Pulte in Las Vegas. And you had to learn very quickly how to deal with upset customers and people who had just closed the day before at a higher price point. And I ended up spending the beginning of my career in what most people arguably call the worst market for new home construction, in probably one of the hardest impacted locations, Las Vegas. But, looking back on that experience, I actually think that it really helped to shape who I am in the business. It helped me to understand that it was going to take a lot of hard work and grit, and things don't just come easily. And the other benefactor of it was that really I ended up with this opportunity of those people who could survive through that thrived. And when things got really lean, I was able to get exposure to a number of different departments, and I could jump in and virtually wear almost any hat that I wanted to because we had so few people actually on the team. So, I look back at it and I actually think going through those hard times was a blessing. And I think it's what helped me move into management as quickly as I did. And ultimately, I was recruited by Taylor Morrison to head down to Phoenix to be their vice president of sales and marketing. And I think I hit Phoenix at like exactly the worst time in that market because it trailed Vegas by about 6 months. But I had the benefit of some really strong leaders and mentors, both male and female. So I got to work, with Cheryl Palmer, who is really the only female CEO and was awarded a Women of the Year award at our conference. But I feel like I was actually kind of recruited and mentored and helped by a number of really strong male leaders who believed in diversity and who believed in creating an operating team that had a variety of opinions and ideas. And so I look back on my career in Pulte and Las Vegas and Taylor Morrison and Phoenix and then the Bay Area, and realize that it takes everyone to really build a unique team, not just females bringing females up, but men bringing women up, and bringing in diversity of all sorts.
Yes, you're hitting on so many great points here. So I love the whole experience of kind of a trial by fire. You're just like, not only you're thrown into this crazy home building industry, but then on top of that, it's like, okay, well, let's test you out and see how are you going to survive in this environment. So, and I agree with you that I think it maybe that challenging times had allowed you to prosper more versus coming into something that's very cushy. You always hear those stories of the days when people lined up outside the model and you literally were like order taker, right? Like, okay, next, $5,000 increase, next. And you hear these stories and you're like, oh my gosh, like can't even imagine, what those days were like. So I think for those of us who've gone through that stressful time of, oh my goodness, people are foreclosing on their homes, credit crunch, nobody's able to get financing. How am I going to survive? How am I going to take care of me or my family? So it's definitely a testament to you, I think, to your strengths and your resiliency, that not only were you able to make it when everyone was getting laid off, but also actually thrive and climb that corporate ladder. So if you don't mind talking to us a little bit about maybe some of the things that you did, that if somebody's maybe just starting out in this industry and they have big aspirations of, eventually running the division or being division president or being that VP of sales, what can they be doing from get-go to position themselves to eventually end up in that category of people?
Right. I think, some of the best advice that I was given when I started my career was, if you want to be something or you want to elevate yourself on, the management ladder, be the position before you have the title. And I think that really that has been one of the largest pieces of advice that I took with me. I became a mentor to others, even though I was maybe, in a sales role, or honestly, even when I was kind of a sales trainee. I just made it a point to always lead by example, to help anyone else who was maybe struggling in an area where I felt I was strong. And so, acting as a leader, regardless of the title, regardless of your income, is probably the first critical path. Actually, I think looking back, I want to say the way that I became a general sales manager, our VP of sales in Vegas kind of polled our peers and said, who would you put forward to want to lead you? And that's not an easy question among salespeople who are all type A personalities and, but to
Me.
all about me. But to have that vote of confidence because they saw that I was acting as a team player, even if it meant, potentially a hit to my own personal commission, but I was more about the entire group succeeding versus myself. And so I think that transition from sales to sales manager is probably one of the hardest and biggest jumps that any of the disciplines within home building can make because they have such different skill sets. To be a strong salesperson typically means you're not doing things that would be qualities of a strong sales manager. And so I think that first leap into management was probably the biggest jump for me and the most kind of educational. And then in terms of other things, one, being curious and asking questions and putting yourself on the line, even if you think it means you look stupid or you don't know an answer. I jumped into roles oftentimes before I was probably 100% ready or prepared. And it's because someone took a leap of faith on me. They knew I would learn. They knew I would grow. They knew I would make mistakes along the way, but I would do my best to fix them and correct them. And so I think if you put yourself out there and you learn all the different facets of the industry and just are constantly a sponge, people will start recognizing that in you and you'll grow much faster than if you kind of stay in your silo of whatever discipline your title technically dictates.
I love what you're saying here. So even when it comes to creating my marketing calendar, I always think like, okay, how can I dream really big and how can I push myself outside of my comfort zone? And then the next question is, who do I need to be in order to execute it, in order to get those results? So I love how you're saying that you need to act as if you're already in that role before you're ever in that role. So I think that's a big shift. And that's a big distinction of people who are successful. That's the mindset that they're in, that I am already acting as if I am the CEO. That's huge. And then you mentioned that the skill set of a successful salesperson is very different from a skill set of a successful sales manager. So can you talk to us about some of those skills and differences, and maybe what can we start working on in order to make that transition a little bit easier?
Yeah. So, I think it's interesting that not all salespeople, but a majority of really strong salespeople, you're kind of guided and expected to be more self-centered, right? It's about fighting for your commission. It's being on a competitive floor. It kind of grooms you to think about almost yourself first and proving that you can get the sale, you can get the customer service. And it can sometimes create, a heightened level of competition on a sales floor, which obviously has its benefits, right? Like as a sales manager or a leader of a sales team, you want those people that have that level of drive. Where I think you have to balance that if you have interest in sales management is looking at kind of the bigger picture. It's not always easy to do when you're in a sales office, but looking at how your team dynamic can better benefit and escalate sales for everyone around you. So rather than, hoarding information or, if you're really good on the CRM system, offer that to others, help train them and teach them how to do whatever it is that you're good at, even if it's, organizing your files or your registration cards, or if you've come up with a system that's fantastic, share it with others, because ultimately it'll help you learn and benefit, and it'll also have your team be more of a networked organization, and hopefully they send you leads, you send them leads, and the company wins. And that's what you need to look at as you progress in your career. Is it's not about you, it's not about even one individual client, it's about the success of the organization. And that's the mental mind shift that people have to go through in that process of moving into management.
I think you're so right. So it's the keeping the bigger picture, and then maybe reaching out and seeing like, okay, what can I do to help this individual thrive? What can I do to help that individual thrive? And when we were at the conference, I was just amazed by how many great women were at that conference, right? I felt like normally I'm a big introvert and I just like want to crawl into my little space, and not talk to anyone, especially after a full day of presentations after presentation after presentation. It becomes very mentally exhausting for me. But I was surprised that, and I don't know, it's because of a company of women, that my guard was lowered, and it felt so easy to talk to everyone. I didn't feel like I had to, pretend to be somebody else. Like normally, you really put on kind of a mask and a guard.
Right.
So it was so at ease. And, one of the people that I met at the conference was Nicole, who is a project manager for you. So, and we got to talking, and again, I was just like, oh my goodness, every turn you take, it's an incredible woman, and the stories and what they're doing. And Nicole kept saying that, I'm so lucky that this company just took a chance on me, that they allowed me to do this, that they recognized the need. And she just kept saying how lucky she was that you took a chance on her. So I just love that. And if you don't mind telling us a little bit about Nicole, her story, because you don't see too many women project managers, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of an unusual, we see a lot of, or more so women going into VP of sales, etc. But to see women out in the construction field dealing with primarily male crew, so I just thought that was such a cool story. And, how did she end up in that position?
Yeah. So, basically toward the end of my career in production home building, I had transitioned to be division president for Taylor Morrison in the Bay Area. And I was there for about 4 years, and it was an incredible experience. Again, yet another unique opportunity to learn and grow and discover a more urban product, and kind of a unique production environment for me. And it was probably the hardest decision that I've made in my career, when I decided to resign from Taylor Morrison, where I felt like I just had so many lifelong friends and mentors and coaches, and Cheryl Palmer obviously being there, and many of the division presidents that led me along the path, Charlie Enix and Steve Waiter. And so I realized that it was kind of a time in my personal life with young children to find just a better balance. And my husband's family company, Magleby Construction, out in Utah, had expanded to a point that they really needed both of our leadership. So I'm more on the operations and business development side, and my husband's more on the construction management side. So we're like, the Joanna Chip Gaines.
You are. You guys should have your own show. Oh my goodness.
So the two of us decided to kind of pack up and move to the mountains and relocate to Park City. And Magleby Construction has about 200 employees. We're a big custom operation. And it's been really exciting to be able to kind of work in this more private custom market that I've never experienced before. And again, another way to be curious and learn. Well, in that transition, I realized that although production builders struggle with diversity, our company is far more truly construction based. So rather than just managing trades, we have a lot of those trades vertically integrated and they're employees of our organization. We have craftsmen and artisans and an excavation team and a millwork team. And so our company is heavily male, more than I had ever even really experienced. And so, but they also recognize the need to diversify. And so bringing me onto the leadership team was one of those steps. And bringing someone like Nicole up through the ranks through training and education and helping to basically pay for her to go to interior design school to better learn the lingo when she's out on a job site, and to put her into situations where she's able to lead a group of oftentimes our site managers have 40 years of field experience at Magleby Construction. And so for a young female to be comfortable and confident walking onto a job site with a client and leading out that process has been really awesome. And we have a number of other women in the organization that we're training and leading up, and getting Nicole out on even the national platform to give her that exposure that you don't always get at a smaller family owned business like you would a large Pulte, Taylor Morrison, Lennar. So yeah, she's been a great success story, and it's been really fun to have someone like her to help mentor and bounce ideas off of. And oftentimes she's training me as well, because I'm new to the construction kind of custom side, and that's where she has a little bit more of her tenure. So
yeah, that's so cool. And if you guys can just picture Nicole is this teeny tiny girl and very pretty. So you can just imagine her being out, in the field working with these guys that, like I said, have 40 plus years of experience. I mean, I'm sure she has a lot of challenges with that. It's, how do you establish yourself as an authority figure and tell them what to do, basically, and have them respect you and work for you. So I'd love to have Nicole on the show at some point. I'm sure it's going to be an incredible story for her to share with our listeners, because I think more and more, like with your story, you're getting all the way to division president. A lot of the times when you hear stories of guys getting to division president, they're doing those kind of rotations through sales and costing and project management. So I think more and more, it's not going to be unusual for girls to go into a project manager role. And so I'd love to talk to Nicole about her experience with that. But, it's so interesting to me that you recognize the need to really bring a female into this field that's largely male dominant. And I think if you look at our industry, it's with 97% white males. And so why do you feel so passionate about bringing diversity into this field? Why do you think that it's important?
yeah, so it's interesting. Obviously, we were just at the Women in Residential Construction Conference, and being a woman, obviously, I have a lot of passion for investing in other women and helping them, mentoring, sponsoring them, passing their resume along. But at the same time, I don't want to lose sight of diversity in general in our business of any minority group. I would argue women have actually probably made the biggest strides towards representation in construction. And I would love to see more diversity in ethnicity, in race, in honestly, for me, it has more to do with just your background and the way you approach problems and questions. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be that you're a different rate. It could be a different socioeconomic background that you came through. But I have always found the most success with my teams that are the most diverse. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean checking a box of some specific minority group or diversity, but you can't have everyone in the room kind of come from the same place and have a similar mindset, or you're never going to drive your company or your business forward. And one of the things that I also spoke about at the conference in my presentation was the changing face of our buyer demographic. So you look out at the buyer population in the United States, and I obviously saw this most prevalently when I was in the Bay Area,
Hmm.
where diversity is almost becoming more common than older white males.
Right.
But I felt like I came into my team and my sales force, who's our front lines, who's out there every day talking to first impression with customers.
Hmm.
Um, they did not represent what my buyer backlog represented. And if there's a disconnect there, we're going to continue to struggle to build product that fits the changing needs of people today. We're going to struggle to sell product and identify with those customers and clients. And so I think we just, as an industry, need to be cognizant and aware of that and do our best to recruit team members that can represent what our home buyers represent and find that pairing.
Hmm. And for those listening that may not be familiar with what you're talking about, so I think Pierrette was specifically referring to the growing millennial generation, right? The millennials are more diverse than any other generation. And I forgot this
I think
statistic. Is it almost, it's close to
like
50%.
one in three
Right.
millennials by like 2024 or something is going to have a kind of minority ethnicity background. So
Hmm.
with both in migration, with just diversity that's occurring around the country, that's what's happening to the buyer demographic, and we need to make sure that we're identifying with them and building product that fits their needs.
Absolutely. And then I think also another benefit to that is sometimes when you come from a different background, or maybe it's not necessarily ethnically or even the color of your skin, but just maybe different socioeconomic background, like you mentioned, you are bred differently, right? You have struggled, and I think that sometimes those people have a little bit more of an internal drive to succeed,
Mhm.
even more so. And so, of course, that translates perfectly into sales role.
Mhm.
But ultimately, anywhere that you want to be successful, and especially if you know going into that position that it's not going to be so easy, you're going to have to overcome some of those challenges. So it definitely makes up for kind of a perfect situation there. So,
Absolutely. I think, it's funny looking back on my path in journalism and thinking like, oh, like this has no relevant, context to construction. Where I do think it has helped me is journalism challenges you to be curious, to be
mhm.
asking questions, to seek out stories that maybe aren't being told elsewhere. And I was more drawn to kind of long format journalism, so more like 60 minutes and international news, and kind of finding stories that took you in depth to something.
Mhm.
And I feel like that is one characteristic that I've used in real estate, whether it's getting to know a client really well and learning and understanding them and qualifying them that way, or whether it was reaching out and learning about people on my team and what triggered them and what, excited them and where they came from and what kind of things they could offer that maybe I hadn't experienced personally. And I love hearing people's stories, and I love building a diverse team because it challenges you as a leader to think differently, and it brings up ideas that you never would have thought of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And I think ultimately what makes a successful salesperson is a lot of the times it's the curiosity. Because
Mhm.
you have to dig so many levels deep. Why? And if you're naturally more curious, then I mean, it just makes it so for an easier conversation with your prospect, and ultimately they'll open up to you more and convert into loyal customers. So I love that. Can you hear howling outside?
No, is that on your side?
Okay. I I have this crazy husky,
Oh,
and it's pouring rain outside. So he
oh
decided to go outside. Can't get him inside the house, but he's sitting there howling. And my neighbors are probably like, oh my gosh, is like a crazy wolf in the neighborhood.
Oh no.
I'm like, oh my God, hopefully you can hear us. So I was laughing a little bit. So yeah, something else. But so you must have had quite it's a whole lifetime of, like working for CNN and like, I can't even imagine that whole story, like what you've seen and places you've been. Do you say you weren't you stationed in London or, yeah.
Yes. No, when I was with CNN, I was in London, and then I worked for a number of kind of local and national news organizations in the Los Angeles area because I got my master's degree at USC.
Mm-hmm.
Spent some time in Southern California, and no, it was a incredible experience. And I still have a love of journalism. I listen to NPR every morning on my way to work, and
Yes.
so yeah, maybe in another life I'll go back into it. You never know, but it makes it easier for situations like this. You get comfortable, speaking publicly and
Definitely.
out there. So
Yeah, it definitely helps. And then, so you guys listening, if you're like, you know what, I have somebody in mind, but I'm not sure if their background's going to be suitable for this role, just talk to them, because just like you, I came into this role by talking to a girlfriend of mine. I was in a transition of my own. I actually had my twins, and I was working in that cubicle office job, and I was just like hating my life, because before I had them, I traveled all over the United States, and of course, once you have them, you can't just leave. So I had
yeah.
this cubicle job, and I was just like, oh my gosh, every single morning driving to work, and I was like, oh, you feel like part of your soul is just dying. And so I was talking to my girlfriend one time, and she's like, oh my gosh, you would be perfect for new home sales. And I remember just walking through the model and just like falling in love and be like, oh my gosh, is this where I get to come to every single day and hang out and, and be my own boss? And so it's just such a great industry. And I think if we can think almost outside the box and think, with the changing demographic, especially going forward, how can we make our team stronger? How can we make our business stronger? Because beyond the shortage of women and minorities in new construction field, there's also just a shortage of
In general.
skilled labor overall. So I think it's going to be a big challenge going forward. So, us being in this industry, we should definitely look for different ways to recruit people into this industry. It may not be more of a traditional way that we're used to, but kind of thinking outside the box, even a CNN reporter.
I think, kind of the way I ended my presentation in Arizona was with like two pieces of advice that everyone in the room could take back to their organization.
Mhm.
And the first one was for anyone in any role. We have to be industry ambassadors. We have to talk about what we do and tell others about what we do, because we are short, over 200,000 workers that we need in this industry. And a lot of times people don't even know that it's a possible path. So my first piece of advice was put yourself out there. Rather than picking up your phone and checking Facebook when you're in line on the way back from the airport, talk to the person next to you. Tell them about what you do. Tell them about how exciting it is. You never know where that seed will be planted and who it may trigger down to. And then the second piece of advice was more for someone who has a management role or a hiring role. And my advice to them was, when you get that stack of resumes and you put half of them aside thinking this is not the right person, not the right fit, not the right background, I would challenge them to go back, pick up one of those resumes out of the no stack and call the person in for an interview. It's at most 30 minutes to an hour of time that you're investing. And again, you never know, those people that you discounted, book by its cover, may end up being one of the best employees you ever hire.
Amen to that. So definitely look in non-traditional ways, and you never know what you may be able to uncover. Pierrette, what's the best way if people wanted to connect with you? Is there a place where you hang out on social media, or if somebody wanted to get to know you a little bit more, how do we connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge social media person. I know it's bad. No, but I do have a LinkedIn profile, so it's under Pierrette Tierney. And from a business perspective, I realize that that's a pretty important place to be relevant. I don't go on Facebook. I'm not super engaged in a lot of that, but honestly, I am totally fine with people reaching out to me directly.
Mhm.
My email address is Pierrette. It's probably the most difficult, but it's Pierrette at maglebyconstruction.com. And Magleby is Magleby.
And I will be sure to link all the information in the show notes so
That'd
that
be
you guys can connect directly with Pierrette. And if you're looking for some ideas for hiring, obviously with your role, you have a lot of experience with that. And how can we broaden this industry and make it stronger? And I would definitely love to have Nicole on the show. So if you can give her a little nudge.
next door to me, so I'll go like
There you go. Tell her, tell her that she's coming up next. So, but thank you so much for being on the show today. I think you're just such an inspiration to not only women, but I think everyone, into what's possible. And clearly, you're able to achieve such success in such a short period of time that if somebody is looking for that, just act as if, sounds
Mhm.
like, and you're halfway there. So, and remember to help each other in this journey. So, but thank you so much, and I hope we'll get to connect very soon again.
Absolutely. Thank you.